Hello, class, and welcome to Point of View Academy. Someone wise once said that you learn something new every day, and in this series, one of us will teach the other about a topic they don't know much about. The teacher of the episode gives a brief lecture to the class, but the student must pay attention because there absolutely will be a quiz at the end. Today's lesson, Obsessive Compulsive Disorder, or OCD. Grab your backpacks, marble notebooks, and don't forget to give your teacher a piece of fruit because class is in session. Just kidding. Before we start, I just want, actually, this is the starting point. I just want to give the definition that comes from the International OCD Foundation, the IOCDF. So, obsessive compulsive disorder, or OCD, is a mental health disorder that affects people of all ages and walks of life and occurs when a person gets caught in a cycle of obsessions and compulsions. And I'll explain what those are later, but this is what they say they are. Obsessions are unwanted, intrusive thoughts, images, or urges that trigger intensely distressing feelings. Compulsions are behaviors an individual engages in to attempt to get rid of the obsessions and or decrease distress. So this part is very key to note. Most people have obsessive thoughts and or compulsive behaviors at some point in their lives, but that does not mean that we all have some OCD. It's kind of like we don't go around saying, oh, I'm a little bit cancer. In order for, and that's not in their definition, that's just a common argument made in the OCD community. In order for a diagnosis of OCD to be made, this cycle of obsessions and compulsions must be so extreme that it consumes a lot of time, more than an hour every day, causes intense distress, or gets in the way of important activities the person values. So, what does all of that mean? Basically, let's start
by... Can I interrupt?
Yes, of course.
Just in terms of the quiz part, because it's been a while since I've been on the receiving end of this type of episode. Are your questions going to be like that in depth? Like, define compulsions.
No.
Okay. Because
no.
I don't know if I'd be able to do that. But, okay.
No, I wouldn't either. I couldn't list that up. I'm serious. I wouldn't be able to list off word for word. I don't think that's natural.
I'm just making sure, because I don't want to be like... Because I know this episode's going to be a good one, and then I don't want to, like, ruin it by being like 0 out of 5.
No, you're good. So... I gave the definition. Most people, when they think of OCD, and I don't blame them because, to be honest, that's what I thought of when I first learned about the disorder before I even knew I had it, was that it's, they like to keep things clean. They like to do things that they have certain, like, tics that they have where they have to touch things a certain amount of times, which... that is a part of OCD for some people, but it's not the full picture, and sometimes there are people that don't have that experience at all. There's a joke that a lot of people with OCD have messy rooms, myself included, at a lot of points in my life, especially when I'm not doing well. But I understand where the stereotype comes from because that's how it's portrayed in the media. We look at people like Monica, the character Monica on Friends. It's never explicitly, I don't think, said that she has OCD, but she has a version of OCD that is often portrayed. But the inaccuracy is that she likes it. She loves being clean. And people with OCD can love being clean and orderly. It's just that it doesn't cause her severe distress in all situations. Obviously, it's a TV show, so they wrote this character. This character's not an actual person. I will share that, and I'm kind of embarrassed by this, but I kind of laugh at it now too, because when I was in 7th grade, when I had OCD and didn't know it, we had watched a video about OCD in health class, and it was accurate. But I was at lunch and I looked over to somebody that was in my class or whatever, or had the same teacher, and I was like, I don't have OCD, and I pretended to like touch something repeatedly. So I was making fun of the disorder while having the disorder unknowingly. And he turned to me, and what did he say? Can you guess?
I have OCD.
Absolutely. And now I am living a curse. No, I'm kidding. This is my penance.
Yeah,
no,
I guess so.
No, nobody who has OCD deserves it or asked for it. I am just putting that out there, but I made the joke.
A funny anecdote.
Yes. So, let's talk a little bit more about obsessions and compulsions for a sec, because obsessions sound great. People that, like, we often use that word pretty accurately, right? Not in the OCD community where it's like, oh, I'm obsessed with that. People would say, I'm obsessed with Lady Gaga, me, if they were saying that about me. And it's true, I am obsessed with Lady Gaga. But interestingly, the part of my OCD that touches on Lady Gaga isn't my obsession with her, it's the obsession that I don't like her. And we'll get into my experience a little bit later. So an obsession isn't something that you're crazy about, you love in OCD. It's a thought or a feeling, as it mentioned, or an urge to do something either inappropriate or against your values, or something that you just don't want to do, or it doesn't fit your self-perception. So that's basically what an obsession is. And everybody has those from time to time. You've heard of what if I were to just drive off this cliff? Or what if I were to just slap this person right now? Like, we all get those weird, intrusive thoughts, which are obsessions. But a lot of us just brush them off. And I've brushed them off. Like, I remember, like, being in second grade, I'd be like, oh, what if I just, like, hit this teacher right now? I'm not a violent person. I've never hit someone, like, it's just not me. And it never bothered me. And it still wouldn't today, even if I had that, because I know it's just not what my OCD sticks to. But, where was I going with this? Oh, so the second part of the disorder, the disorder that makes it a disorder, is the compulsions part. So it causes severe, severe, severe distress to the point that you have to figure out what it means. Or get rid of it, whether that's performing something that's highly illogical, but it just makes sense in your OCD brain. It rationalizes it that, if I don't count to 10 times, my mom's gonna die. That's just an example. Or if I don't figure out, did I actually do this thing a year ago that I wouldn't do today? Or was that a false memory? Or do I deserve to even lead a good life, and you just start obsessing over it. That in and of itself, you don't have to see, not all compulsions are visible. In fact, there's a nickname for a theme of OCD called pure O, where the compulsion is rumination, where you just think about it. You have to it just plays over and over and over. And sometimes it's, habitual. It's not even something you realize you're doing. And it just plays over and over and over. And it causes severe distress to the point that, like, I've become depressed over certain obsessions that I've had. But I want to take a step back, because that was a lot. One thing that helps people get, I think, a better understanding of what OCD deals with a little bit are the different sub-themes or subtypes that we use to categorize different obsessions. I want to just be very clear, though, about these, that they aren't diagnoses. Is that even a word, diagnoses? Diagnoses? Okay. They're not diagnoses. So the diagnosis is OCD, but there are different thoughts, different types of thoughts that bother people with OCD. So they kind of group them together in these sub-themes just to, create community within the, with people that have OCD, and also just to kind of label, like, yep, that's a comment, like, that's a sign of OCD. This might be a sign of OCD. So I want to just talk about each one for a second, because this will, I think, give testament to the scope of what OCD really is and how it can bother people and what it's not. So the first theme, we will just talk about it because it's one of the more known themes, is perfectionism. It's having to do something exactly right, or it means it means something about your worth as a human, or that something bad is going to happen, or that you don't deserve something good to happen to you. That's perfectionism, and I'll talk about I'm going to detail my experience with that theme to kind of explain it in a little bit. HOCD, which is more commonly referred to now as SOOCD, it's sexual orientation OCD. A lot of OCD revolves around sexuality and sexual themes, sexual thoughts. It used to be called HOCD because because it was referred to as homosexual OCD. Now it's referred to as sexual orientation OCD just because people who are gay can have it too and fear that they're straight. It's basically fearing that you're the wrong sexuality or you're not the sexuality that you actually are. And there can be a multitude of symptoms with that. So you could have the thought that, oh, I might be lying to myself. But then you think, no, I wouldn't lie to myself. But wait, have I ever looked at a whatever girl or guy a certain way? No, I don't think so. And then you start checking. That becomes the compulsion. That's the compulsive part, is the checking. You can check for arousal. Am I aroused by this? You can look at pictures and be like, is this something I like? But it causes insane amounts of distress. This is not a fun time. Another compulsion there would be to avoid whatever is triggering you. And that was something I did in college a lot, was I would avoid. And I'll talk about that in a second too, but I just want to continue on with the listing of the themes. And I also want to say to please keep an open mind when I'm not speaking to you. I know that we've talked about a lot of these and you will, but I'm just speaking to listeners because a lot of these are very hard to talk about and are taboo because oftentimes you hear that and it's like, oh my God. And it's like, no, the person experiencing this is like probably in bed sobbing or unable to get up because they can't stop thinking about this and they hate it and it's causing them so much distress. Relationship OCD. Am I with the right partner? I also see this come out a lot OCD can attach to anything you like, and it often does. Anything that you are passionate about, it'll target. So I kind of, when I talk about my liking Lady Gaga, say a song comes out and I'm like, oh, I don't really like that song as much. It turns very quickly into, do I not like her? No, I must not like her. But what does this mean about me? Because a big part of my identity is liking her. Like, wait, do I not agree? Does she not actually stand for what she says she stands for? Did she lip sync during this performance? She says she never lip syncs, and then you just go down to the rabbit hole where I would start avoiding her music entirely because I'm like, oh, I don't like it. It really convinces you, and you start to get the thoughts, the feelings that, oh, I just don't like this. And then it becomes, oh, am I living a lie? Should I take down my posters? I don't want to. That feels like a big part of me is missing. And it sounds really dumb because it's like, yeah, you can change opinions about who your favorite artist is. Like, anyone can do that, and that's fine. But the whole reason that this is happening is basically because you don't want it to. And it's often, they call it like a whack-a-mole disorder too, because when one obsession goes away, another one usually pops up. I rarely have two bothering me at the same time. But relationship OCD too. Am I with the right partner? Oh, notice it starts to pick out like flaws in the person. I probably don't like this. And then you feel unhappy in your relationship and it sucks because you love the person and it's not your true feelings. Health OCD, you can probably imagine what that is. It's people that, there's health anxiety, of course. But health OCD is basically that with the thought that, oh, I just felt this is just an example. I just felt this movement in my foot. What is that? Do I have a tumor? Oh my gosh, I have a headache. What does that mean? You can get triggered by anything, really. But then the compulsions start when, somebody might research obsessively about what they're experiencing. Is it cancer or is it just a growing pain? They might go to the doctor a lot and be like, are you sure? I know, I don't want to mess up the story too much, but there's an OCD advocate who has OCD himself named Ethan. He was an actor before this, so he is well known enough. But I believe he dealt with this to the point that his doctor said like, oh no, you're fine. And he was like, no, I'm not fine. And he needed to go to the hospital. So he like put his head in an iceberg, or not an iceberg, sorry, like I don't even know what you would call those, ice or snowbank, and made himself bleed to go to the hospital to make sure he was okay. So like it really can get devastating, and
That's
and ruin
interesting
lives.
too, because when you were describing it, I was thinking about people who are, diagnosed hypochondriacs, where they think like, oh, something that could be a health thing is bigger than it is. But then you using that story helped me kind of realize it's more than that. It's like, okay, someone who has the health theme might think, okay, there's something wrong, a movement in my foot might be something, or a headache might be something. But then to the point where even if a doctor has said, no, there's nothing wrong, they might, or at least in the example you gave, arm themselves so that
they can go back,
or that they go back, or I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't want to say that they're believed, but
right. No, it's not that they feel like they're not believed. They get relief. And I'm going to talk about why that's a bad thing. Like, why not just do the compulsion and then feel better and move on about your day? They get relief by going to the doctor, but then the anxiety starts to build again, and we'll talk about why that is. And then they're like, no, I need to go back. I need to just check one more time. I personally believe the most stigmatized theme of OCD is POCD, which is the fear of being a pedophile. And that is gut-wrenching. Just because, well, first of all, I can't think of a worse thing in society to harm a child. I don't know. Like, I think, well, I'm not even going to say murder versus, sexually harming a child, but there's nothing worse, in my opinion. People will start, oh, I just noticed that child. Am I attracted to that child? Oh, when I was younger, when I was a kid, I did this. Was this an indicator of that? Let me think. Oh, I can't gauge the age of that child, especially like if you're like, on the cusp of being 18. Is that person 18? Oh, they're not 18 yet. Oh my God, what was I thinking? Would I ever act on this? I don't think I'd act on it. Oh my God, I just looked at this picture on Instagram. Is that mean? And you just go down this spiral. And you can imagine, as OCD attacks what you love. So a lot of people that experience this theme love children and love being around children, are either a new parent, or they have kids, or they're a teacher, or they just value being a good person. Like, that's just, that theme can attack any of that. And who doesn't want to be a good person? Like, for the most part, I would say that we all strive to be a good person, and that's the for someone without OCD, it's like, oh yeah, no, I would never, like, that's a silly thought, like, whatever. But you can really, really break down the, like, I'm going to use the word molecules just to, like, really pull apart the argument until the point that you just believe it. And as I mentioned, OCD can be very convincing. It can give you, when you think about sex, you're going to have symptoms with all of the different sexual themes. And I will talk about my experience with one of the some of the sexual themes in a moment. But the other ones I want to talk about, moral scrupulosity, just having a mean thought. It's like, oh, what does that mean about me? Pure O, as I mentioned before, it's, having the thought, and it doesn't necessarily look like you're doing a compulsion, but you very well could be. I could be sitting with you talking right now, and I could be ruminating, and I could have been ruminating all day. Sometimes I don't even realize I'm doing it. Like I said before, like, it's something that can go on without me noticing. Harm, we talked about that one a little bit. People, and these as you can probably tell, they kind of cross over a little bit. Like, POCD, like, that's harm in and of itself, but it's also a sexual theme. It's like they're holding hands. In the same way that, like, they're clear moral boundaries right there. Like, that are just like, if you can't see them, it's like, well, there's something wrong. The last one I'll talk about is contamination, which can be both physical in terms of, like, germs or things touching each other that shouldn't, but they can also be, oh, I just had this thought and it doesn't align with my values. So, like, my brain is contaminated or my mind is contaminated. I just thought this, whether it's impure or, oh, I just got this wrong answer on a test, but it was touching a paper. This was something that I actually experienced. I don't like my handwriting on this paper, but it was touching another paper that I did like my handwriting. The molecules of the pencil probably rubbed off on it. It's contaminated. I need to start over. That happened with the iPad too, because we wrote on our iPads a lot in college or in high school, and I didn't like my handwriting on it, so I erased it. It's not there. There's no, like, eraser marks on an iPad, obviously, but I was like, I need to delete this note because that was there at one point. So those are some of the themes. Do you have any questions so far? Because those are not all of them, and I do want to put it out there for anyone that's listening without giving reassurance that OCD can literally attack anything, be so specific, it can convince you of anything, and it will use everything, because it knows your brain. It's a disorder in your brain, so your brain knows itself, and it's going to use whatever it can to attack you.
Sure. I think one of the questions I have is, like, one, re-emphasizing that it's not, those themes are not diagnoses of them within themselves, but so as someone who has OCD, or just generally speaking, if someone were to be diagnosed with OCD, could they have obsessions and compulsions in different themes, or is it common that there might just be like a few, or could throughout their experience with OCD kind of like maybe it's or like not touch base,
change
the different themes?
Of course.
Is it
of
just
course.
case by case it's different?
Yeah, my therapist calls it the snowflake disorder because every single one is different, because everybody's values are a little bit different. I've experienced many of these themes. And like I said, the list goes on. And when I say I only experience one at a time, that's generally speaking, it's not always the case, but they come back. It's whack-a-mole for a reason. It's like you hit it down, one pops up. You get over that one. I remember when I got a therapist in Baltimore senior year of college, and I was really, really struggling. I had confirmed that I got reassurance because this person wasn't certified in OCD treatment. She was just a general therapist, which a lot of them do treat OCD or claim to, just because it's, that's a thing that it's not illegal to. Like, they're not breaking any rules, and they don't know, or like they'll know about ERP, which is the gold standard of treatment, but they won't practice it themselves. They're like, oh, I'm not licensed to practice that. But I do talk therapy, and talk therapy, unfortunately for OCD, does not work on its own. But yeah, so I remember getting reassurance for one of my theme, and immediately as I walked out, I felt like $1,000,000. And then I was like, oh, but wait, and another theme popped up. And the rational part of your brain knows this is in some way. So I'll say it's really hard to trust your gut when you have this disorder, because it's not always the case when it's like, oh, but the rational part. It's like, no, I don't. My gut instinct is telling me that I'm a bad person, or that I made a horrible mistake, or that I'm not good enough, or that I don't like this. So it's really, it's difficult, but I forget. Oh yeah, to answer your question, yes, you can have multiple. When one goes away, it doesn't stay away all the time. It often doesn't stay away. But yeah, you can have more than one. I know somebody who was afraid of eating because they were afraid of choking. So they would eat for it would take them 2 hours to eat a meal because they were very afraid of choking. I know another person that was, so that's like a life or death fear, really, or like you're afraid of dying, essentially, or choking. But then I know somebody who loved animals and worked as a vet technician, and her OCD targeted sexual themes towards animals. Now, did she want to, I don't have to say this to people that have OCD, but I'm just going to say it for the people that don't. That was the last thing she wanted to do, was do something inappropriate to an animal. Like, she was an animal lover, and it killed her that she, not literally, but it killed her inside that she wasn't able to do, that she was avoiding the job that she loved so much. That was her compulsion. She avoided it because the thoughts were too devastating to her.
Yeah, and I honestly don't even think you need to disclaim it in the episode too, because I think we try and create a show and a space where people are assuming good content, intent, so if anybody, for instance, you're talking about these things which are some obsessions or some things that just ruminations or whatever are awful things. but that person doesn't necessarily want to have that. No, not necessarily.
No,
does not
they
want
don't.
to
Right,
have that.
exactly.
So I don't even think
They
you
think
have to
they
even say that.
Yeah, but interestingly, they'll think they do at one point because
Right.
it's
that mind
that's
battle
the
of-
obsession.
and then the moral
It's-
scrupulity of like
yeah, the scrupule. It's like, oh, but I probably do like that. Oh, I found this thought arousing. What does that mean? Also, I've learned a lot about what the body can do with just from OCD, not with OCD, but also with OCD. Just if you have a sexual thought, your body might, subconsciously prepare you for, quite frankly, sex. That's something called arousal non-concordance, when it's if you don't want to have sex in that moment and your body starts preparing you for it. It's like, well, it's feeling arousal at something that you're not actually interested in. But it is not to say that, oh, if I have this thought, something bad will happen. Like, just because I think something doesn't mean it's going to happen. That is a term called magical thinking. I know some people believe in manifestation, like, oh, if I repeat, I'm going to win $1 million. I'm going to win $1 million. It's more likely to happen. But there is no, and like, if you think that way, good for you. But there is no scientific evidence that backs that at all. When it comes to manifestation, you can say like, oh, I'm going to be the CEO of a company and repeat it to yourself. But if all you're doing is repeating it to yourself in your head, it's not any more likely to happen than if you didn't repeat it. You have to, I believe that it's the repeating is keeping it fresh in your brain, so you then work towards that goal. So I just wanted to make that distinction. But I want to talk a little bit about my experience. Two things, or I'll give three, I guess. Experiences of mine with OCD that were the harder times, I guess. The first time, I'm actually going to this is interesting. I have the letter that I wrote. First of all, I was diagnosed when I was 13, I believe. I was 14. I was a freshman in high school. I have the letter that I wrote to my guidance counselor. It's an email, and I saved it, and thank God I did. Because I just find it really, not funny now, but it's just really cool to see how far I've come and also how much I've had to go through since this. So, hi, Mr. Blank. I stopped by your office today during my third period free, but you were talking to somebody, therefore I am sending you this email. Who says therefore?
I do.
I have a, in quotations, problem with something. I do too, but I was 14. I have a, in quotations, problem with something. It's not threatening to me or anyone else, but it's raising my stress level when it comes to academics. I was wondering if I could stop by at a time convenient for you just to hear your thoughts about my situation. It's kind of long, so that's why I haven't gone into details. I have a free tomorrow, fourth period. I'm here until 3:45 every day, except Thursdays, and I have one of my 3 extracurricular activities after school on Wednesday. So you could just email me back. Oh, if you could just email me back when you get the chance, I would greatly appreciate it. Thanks, Nick Gervasi. And that's dated 10/10/12. That's a word-for-word email that I sent to my guidance counselor freshman year of high school. And at the time, I was dealing with the theme of perfectionism. I didn't know about themes or anything. I just knew that something was wrong. I was at a point where I was like, I'm only going to get straight A's. I'm only going to get straight A's, and if I get an A, or I could get an A minus, but if I get below that, that's like the worst thing that could ever happen to me. That was truly the worst thing that I could think of happening to me at my life at that time. I was at a point, this was kind of pathetic and sounds pathetic, but the night before freshman year of high school, I prayed. I said a literal prayer to be perfect because I couldn't bear anything else. And obviously that's not something that could happen, but I just planned that, I'm going to walk in 90-degree. And what does that even mean? Because even if somebody was perfect by their own definition, like you could find, I breathed, like, what would that be? Like breathing in intervals that are exactly the same. Like, it's impossible. And we know that. But my handwriting was going to be perfect. I wasn't going to have any like divots. Like if I was writing on a bumpy surface, like on my desk, like I would have to put multiple pieces of paper underneath. And I was dealing with perfectionism. Perfectionism, OCD, which really, remember the diagnosis is just OCD. I talked to him. He was very helpful. in just, being there for me my 4 years of high school. But I went to my, at the time, pediatrician, who then shared with me a list of therapists who, by the way, were talk therapists. So interesting. And that was when I started uh, my journey, I guess, once I was diagnosed and I got on medication. I'm not going to say what medication I was on just because medication works differently for everyone. And I'm not a doctor, obviously. But that was my experience with perfectionism. I remember trying to clean my room. This was like yes, I liked it to be clean at the time, but it was all right, it's clean. I took 3 days to clean it. I looked up a list online of how to clean a room, which is wild because, like, who doesn't know how to clean? I just wanted to know how to do it the right way. It took me about 3 days. I finally did it. And then I'd go in with a flashlight, look for dust. Wouldn't see any dust there. I'd get halfway down the stairs, come back up, check again. And that's the compulsion right there, is the checking. And at the time, my people were giving me crutches. They were actually helping me ritualize without even realizing it. Like, okay, you can use your iPad to type notes so you don't have to write. They were just trying to get me comfortable, I guess. Because they didn't know, like, who knew? Everybody thought they were doing the right thing, including myself. I think probably the worst part of that theme, my experience with that theme, was annotating the Odyssey freshman year. We were in a hotel room. It was, our power was out because of the storm. I don't know if you remember the storm. You were in 8th grade. It was a snowstorm. We had school canceled for like a week.
Blizzard Nemo.
Was that it? That's funny. Yeah, and I was in the fetal position because I'm not even kidding, because I couldn't annotate the right way, if there is even a way to do that. And my parents were like, I don't think you can continue going to this school because it's clearly too much. They knew I had OCD, but like, it's like, you are really struggling and we think you need more help right now. I did continue to go to the school, and I'm very grateful that I did. But that was my first experience with the theme of perfectionism, which is kind of more thought to be what OCD is, but I don't think you see the extremes. Like, it's not, oh, I like my pens in rainbow order, and I'm just because there are people that are perfectionists, and it is what it is, and they get joy out of that, and trust me, I did too, but I was never happy for long because something had to be better. Do you have any questions so far? Because I realize I'm talking a lot, but...
No, I'm following. I think maybe a personal question is, you just said the perfection theme isn't necessarily, okay, all of my pens are in the rainbow color order. I do know that personally you enjoy having a different color pen for every month. That's a personal thing, though, right? That's not... I do.
Yeah. It's interesting because it is a personal thing.
That's why I'm bringing it up, is because I knew it was a personal thing. It was kind of like a leading question, right, I guess. But like, I feel like, and again, this is just me guessing, and call me out if I'm wrong, but like, I feel like, okay, someone could find out, Nick has OCD, and then they could be like, the pen thing, that must be...
Right. Everybody has their quirks that we do,
right.
and honestly, it could have factored in at one point where it's like, I didn't use that color, and if I'm going to be perfect, I have to stick to one. It didn't, but it would have, had I thought about it at the time.
Sure.
But so that was my experience with like what people sometimes think of OCD as. The next one was when I developed feelings for someone for the first time. In my life, like romantic feelings for someone, in senior year of high school. I thought that I was just like, I have never been happier being around someone than I do at this moment. We had just gone through a very, I've talked about this a little bit, a very, I don't even know the right word. It was like a spiritual, we went on a retreat. So it was a very... close. We went on like a journey together, I guess.
It was a moving...
a bunch of us. Yeah, it was moving, and I'm not just saying the two of us. That's kind of weird, because it wasn't the two of us. It was a bunch of people. Right. And I developed feelings for that person, and before I could even tell them, I had I'm sitting in my bed going through a lot, as you can imagine. You're 17 years old, you're hormonal, whatever. And I had this thought as soon as I told someone, what if I'm not the sexuality I think I am? And immediately everything turned against me being happy, really. I kind of just I wrote about it in my senior essay, and I said I never thought, and for some reason I knew this was OCD at the time, but I didn't, because like I said, you know sometimes rationally what it is, what's happening, but you also can't believe that that's the case. So I wrote about it in my senior essay saying I never thought OCD could cut me like it did. I felt like it went through my ribs, which is supposed to protect the heart, and like stabbed me in it because I felt so much for this person. And lo and behold, it didn't work out, but I had been devastated, much before that. And it was by my own brain. Because then I started having sexual thoughts about a different gender than the one that this person is and that I was attracted to. And that hadn't happened before. And I was like, what the hell is going on? I am the first person on earth to change sexualities, like to actually change, not to just like, because sexuality is fluid, but I was like, this happened overnight because I didn't want it to. What actually happened? Like they say you can't change your sexuality. You can't like say like, oh, I want to be this, I want to be that. It was devastating. And I do want to put it out there that sexuality is fluid, and there are people that are bisexual that don't label, and that is totally valid and totally real. But the whole reason this was happening in my case was because I didn't want it to, and I had found somebody that I really was emotionally and physically attracted to. Mm-hmm. And like I said, OCD can start to cause real arousal. Real arousal, and you hate it because it's so uncomfortable. You're sitting there like, what the hell do I do? Like, I hate this, I hate this, I hate this. I'm not attracted to this gender. What is happening? I started avoiding people that were triggering to me for that reason. I thought I was lying to myself, like for a full year and even longer. I thought I was just completely lying to myself. I was a total fraud. It was rough, to say the least. But, I didn't want to, it just robbed me of something that was so special to me. Same thing with, I'll talk about the retreat just very briefly. I had so much love for that retreat, and it was just such a transformative time in my life that I never wanted to go on a retreat again. I couldn't listen to the music that was played at that retreat because I didn't want that memory to fade. I didn't want the memory to become less special or to attach different meaning. And that's kind of like the contamination thing. Like, I don't want to go on another retreat because I don't want my experience of a retreat to change. I don't want the experience of this Adele song, which was When We Were Young, to change. So that's contamination. The last story I will tell happened senior year of college, and I don't even think I've told you this. I call it with, I shared it with my direct roommate. I called it like the darkest day of my life. Like physically, it felt like everything was jet black. I had just gone to Target. I had spoken, mind you, to my therapist, only a few days before, and she confirmed to me, no, this isn't true. This is your OCD. And I believed her for 5 minutes or, however long until something else triggered me. But we were in your apartment. I don't even know if you were there. You weren't. It was Valentine's Day. You were out with someone. I was in your apartment with your roommates, and we ordered pizza. And I had just gotten my weighted blanket from Target because that was like, they were like, oh, that's something that you should, that might help you, because that was something that my therapist had, and I used it in a session and it really helped me. But I went home that night, I believe, to my apartment afterwards because I left after we ate the pizza. I was like, I just don't want to be around people. This is the darkest day of my life. Literally everything felt like it was jet black around me. It was like 4 a.m, between 2 and 4 a.m, and I was just like literally banging my head against the pillow, yelling, like not yelling to wake up my roommate, but like, this is not me. What the fuck is happening to me? Like, I hate this so much. This is evil. What is wrong with me? And I didn't know who to call because everyone was asleep. And it was probably the worst night of my life. I remember looking at my direct roommate coming home from that, and just like, he could see it on my face. He was also not having a good day, and I was just like, I am not doing well. I spent a lot of, this theme followed me and still does, they all follow me still, but I spent a lot of time, as you know, I was in Florida during the pandemic at my friend's house, or at Elizabeth's house, who was on episode 14. I spent almost, I would say there were times where I'd call my mom on the hour for reassurance, which was the compulsion. I was standing out at their pool because I didn't want anybody to hear me, but I was so scared. I would sleep a lot. I would research OCD a lot, and the themes that I was going through. And I was going through more than one at the time too, but they were like kind of flip-flopping. So like, I'd research about the sexual theme, that would go away. The Lady Gaga theme would pop up almost immediately after. And at the time that you're experiencing it, that one feels like the only real one. So it's like, whatever you're experiencing in the moment, this is the real one. Everything else is OCD. Or I don't have OCD. I'm just a bad person or a deviant. Or I have OCD and this is a theme of OCD, but this isn't OCD. It's wild. So those were, I tell those not to, garner sympathy. I don't want that. And I'm very proud of how far I've come. Because there was a time that I couldn't even, when I came home from Baltimore, we went from Florida to Baltimore, and then Baltimore I came home, before going into treatment, there was a time I couldn't even go out to dinner because I didn't want to be triggered. I would stay home when my family went out to dinner. And I'm very proud of where I've come from, or how far I've come. But I share these just to show how debilitating it can be. Sorry, I burped. And how bad someone with sexual orientation OCD, POCD, harm OCD, any of the more taboo ones can feel, just because it's one thing to be like, oh, I'm afraid this is going to happen. It's another thing to like fully believe in the moment, I want this to happen. And that's terrifying because clearly your response is saying otherwise. And your history is saying otherwise, but then you start going into, well, did this happen? Did I do this? Oh, I think this was wrong. I confessed to a lot of things during my time in college that I didn't even do, like to my parents and to my therapist. Did this happen the way I think it did? Or am I a bad person for doing this? Or I must have done this to this person. And I'm still here, and I've been through residential OCD treatment, and all of the therapists all of the OCD experts, I'm going to stop here after this because I don't want to reassure myself too much, have said the same thing. And you can probably imagine what it is, without reassuring myself. Before we end, I just want to talk about how OCD is treated, because I mentioned talk therapy doesn't work. Why doesn't it work? Well, OCD is a cycle. So it starts with the obsession. It causes anxiety. You do the compulsion, whatever it is, whether it be confessing, researching, touching something 10 times, testing for arousal, rewriting something because your handwriting didn't look good. Whatever it is, chewing for 2 hours. You do the compulsion and you feel incredible. You're like, that was just my OCD. That's awesome. And let me just add this little tidbit because I think it's so important. As soon as you get away from that certainty provided by the compulsion, as soon as you get that little bit of uncertainty, if your OCD brain can't prove that your fear isn't true, if it can't get certainty that your fear isn't true, it would rather subconsciously work against you. This is, again, subconscious. It would rather get certainty that your fear is true than to be uncertain. And again, that's subconsciously, because let's pick the example of the rock again. If I have a fear that I'm going to throw a rock at someone and I don't, that's why I'm picking it. My OCD, like the subconscious part of my OCD brain, would, if I can't prove for fact that I'm not going to throw it, which none of us could prove that, it would rather prove that, oh, I want to throw that rock. When, if you think about it, if you were given two options, do you want to be uncertain that you're going to throw the rock, or do you want to be certain that you're going to throw the rock at someone? If you're a good person, you'd rather, I guess, be uncertain. But that's not, so like, yes, consciously, that's what you might be thinking, but subconsciously your brain is like, well, I need certainty, so I'd rather be certain that this is what's going to happen. And that's where the terror comes from. So when people say, oh, OCD is about certainty, and the people struggling are like, well, that's not really true. I don't want to be certain. Like, of course you don't want to be certain that you're going to hurt someone. It's not a conscious need for certainty all the time. But the thing is, nothing is certain in life. So as soon as you get even an ounce of uncertainty, you're less prepared to tolerate it, because you just did something that reasserted that you need to do this thing. Otherwise, you're in danger, basically. So your brain, that feedback loop is saying, oh, I need to do that again. So you go back to the obsession. You're starting to obsess again because you have a little bit of doubt, and it grows and grows and grows until it's a certain fact in your mind. And then, I need to do the compulsion, you do it. And a lot of times talk therapy can be compulsive. So how do you break that? We talked about it last episode a little bit, exposure, response, and response prevention, ERP. So what that is doing the exposure, exposing yourself to the obsession, sometimes in a very extra way, something that you wouldn't do in normal life. And I'll give examples in a second. And then you don't do the research. You don't do you don't touch whatever you have to in order to feel safe. And you sit with the uncertainty and the thought that, hey, maybe I am gay. Maybe I am straight. Maybe I am, going to harm someone. And it's terrifying. But as you sit with it, the obsession, it might go up a little bit. The anxiety might spike a little bit at first, but it will eventually, start to come down, and you realize, wow, nothing happened during this exposure except my anxiety. But that's not even the point of it, because the point is, like, you live with OCD. OCD is chronic. It doesn't, ever go away. These thoughts don't ever go away, but the point is not to get rid of the thoughts. The point is to get rid of the response to it, because OCD... So I just want to say to anybody that is doing ERP or has OCD, struggling with OCD, battling OCD, whatever you want to call it, you are an absolute badass, because this is the only disorder that fights its treatment in a way that it tells you, no, don't do that. It's actually dangerous to do that. It's not going to help you. It's going to prove whatever you're afraid of to be true. So you are incredible, absolutely incredible. It has been said that OCD is one of the top 10 most debilitating mental disorders, and I just am in awe of everyone's bravery in fighting this horrible, horrible disorder. I like to think of ERP as pulling a fire alarm but then dancing to it and kind of training your brain a little bit that, this isn't as scary as you think it is, or maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I don't know. The alarm is going in your head, but you're not going to react to it. Obviously, do not pull fire alarms. This is a PSA. I also like to think of ERP, as you all know, my favorite artist is Lady Gaga. The song Rain on Me, I've said this before, that it's helped me through a lot of the stages of my OCD recovery, and I don't think I've ever explained why on this show, but the reason I say that is because Rain on Me is about dancing through your tears, dancing through the pain, dancing through the rain, really. And it kind of goes back to that, it's a cliche metaphor, but life is not about waiting for the storm to pass. It's about learning to dance in the rain. And it's so true. It's all of these things are happening. These thoughts are happening. These fears are happening. These urges are happening. I don't think I'm good enough. I think I'm broken. Whatever. Rain on me. We're going to dance to it. So that's just my word of encouragement for all of you. But so I'll give a few, and then we'll do the quiz. Examples of ERP for the different themes that I gave. So let me pull up that list again. And please, if I haven't explained anything well, or if I've been too brief, I'm really trying to walk the line of, sharing authentically and also not doing compulsions or oversharing. And I'm going to have my therapist listen to this too, because he is an expert in OCD treatment, and he also, this is comforting to me but also reassuring, he works, he's a professor at Harvard Medical School, so he does good work, to say the least. But so perfectionism, you might intentionally put a misspelling in a paper. Yeah, it might give you a lower grade. Okay, like, yeah, that's a real thing that's really affecting you. Like, you might get a lower grade, or the teacher might not notice, but what's going to happen? You might get an A- instead of an A. You might get an 87 instead of an 88. Like, and you learn to live with that uncertainty.
These are examples of ERP.
Yes. And there's people work with their treatment team to figure out and a lot of people there's a hierarchy. So, like, you do your easier ones. You start with your easier ones so you don't, have a full-blown panic attack, which, funny enough, not really, but in treatment, I was like, I'm going to go for the hard, like, I was just having a day. I was like, F this, I'm going for the hardest one, and it was like jumping into a pool head first with no water in it. That was how my therapist, one of them, described it. But anyways, sexual orientation, if you're afraid that you're gay, maybe looking at, pictures of men on the beach, if you're a man and think you're gay, or if you're gay and think you're straight, looking at pictures of women and not using it as reassurance. Not, is this something I'm enjoying? What does this, like, physical response mean? It's just, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I'm going to sit with it, and then I'm going to go do something that's value-based in my life. Because the whole, everything, the OCD, like, all these thoughts are ego dystonic, which means they're not aligned with your values. So you then go do something that's value-based, and you just let it be what it is. Maybe I am gay. Maybe I am straight. POCD, going to a park, going and, like, sitting. I know somebody that sat with their therapist on a park bench and just went at a playground and just looked at kids. Or, if you have, like, nieces and nephews, playing with them, letting them sit on your lap if they want to. I'm a big believer that, you shouldn't force. I'm fully serious. Like, any kid to do what, like, it's like, if they don't want to hug you, don't. Yeah, but you know what I mean? Like, I think it's not necessarily something that we always think about. Some people are like, oh, just give me a hug. Like, no. Because I think that's teaching kids consent at an early age, is to, ask them. But, or even, like, the harder ones would be like, oh, if you're with them and it's appropriate and you're helping give them a bath, like, something like that. It's really, I know, is really distressing for people with OCD. Like, that is not a happy act. Bath time is, for a lot of people, a bonding moment, with their kids, or, nieces, nephew, grandkids, whatever. Not so much for the people with OCD, if they have that theme. Relationship OCD. Oh, maybe I did just find that other, because that's we find people attractive, right? Just because you're in a relationship and you're monogamous does not mean you don't see other people, like, when you're walking down the street and be like, oh, they're god awful ugly. That might be an example of that. Or maybe I didn't, like, or talking to, like, a compulsion might be avoiding anybody else that of the same sex as your partner. Just be like, I don't want to talk to any of them because I don't want to cheat. Like, maybe it is going to a party and dancing with someone, not slow dancing, or maybe it is slow dancing. I don't know. I guess your partner would have to be in on the treatment planning if that were the case. And the list goes on, moral scrupulosity. Maybe you don't hold the door for someone. One time, my treatment team was like, what if you were anti-Nick for a day? What if you just went around and were not friendly? What if you were kind of rude to strangers? What would that... And who wants to be rude, right? But at the end of the day, people are rude sometimes, and it's like, what would happen if you were rude? You're not going to die. And it's not you. It's not saying, oh, just let's throw caution to the wind, but what's the worst that can happen? It's kind of that. So I'm going to stop there just because you kind of get the point. But I do just want to say, before we go on to the questions, that if you are struggling with this disorder, you think you're struggling with this disorder, you can go to NoCD on Instagram, and they have their official website on there. But I go to Instagram for NoCD. It's an official organization that treats OCD. They've been around for a few years now. They actually just partnered with Howie Mandel, who has diagnosed OCD. You can use them to find a therapist, learn more about OCD, talk to other people who have OCD. They're a very reputable company, and they take insurance. And they're supported by this next group, the IOCDF, which is, I mentioned them before, they're the International OCD Foundation. You can learn all about the disorder on there. They have a conference that I have yet to go to because of COVID, that I would love to go to. My therapist recommends I go to it. He's been to it multiple times. And they also have you can find a therapist that practices ERP, which is the gold standard. Throughout, OCD specialists they will tell you ERP is the gold standard for OCD treatment. And then the other thing is, so there are 3 people that I want to shout out that are advocates for OCD. They're not, at least one of them is a therapist, but they're not your therapist, obviously. They're just advocates on social media for Instagram. One of them is Chrissy Hodges. Her handle, I believe, is @PuroChrissy. She does a lot of YouTube videos with incredibly detailed, if you want to talk the taboo obsessions, she goes there, and she's incredible because she makes people with OCD feel less alone. I love her, and she's funny. She's really, really funny. She has a book too, Puro, The Invisible Side of OCD, but she's one of them. Allegra Castens, who is Obsessively Ever After, she's incredible too, and Kimberly Quinlan, who wrote the self-compassion. I forget. What's the title? I'm gonna Google it quickly because I have it and I love it. The Self-Compassion Workbook for OCD, and she has a podcast, Your Anxiety Toolkit, which she talks about OCD and anxiety-related disorders and how to cope with them in a self-compassionate way, and she's also incredible. And even if you don't have OCD, all 3 of those for educational purposes, if you want to know more about the disorder and really learn how to support your friends and not give them reassurance, they are 3 great places to start. Questions before we get into the...
No. I think this was a very good episode. You
I
covered
hope
lots of different things. Yeah.
I hope I wasn't too brief or too sparing of the details, but like I said, that's a mix of me not wanting to overshare, me not wanting to do that compulsion of this, and this, and and if people don't get mad, then it must just be my OCD, because I've been down that rabbit hole before.
No, I don't think you were too sparing with detail. I mean, this is going to be maybe our longest Academy episode, but I don't think that's a bad thing. You mentioned a little bit, but I want to talk about stigma, because stigma kind of comes up with mental health just generally, as someone who is in the mental health field myself, as well as experienced mental health issues in the past. Stigma is a huge thing. And I know that for OCD at least, I hear in a handful of my circles still,
me too.
People saying, "Oh, that's just my OCD," when they're talking about pet peeves, or when they're talking about organizing, or talking about something, whatever. So I guess, do you want to say anything, or I'm going to give the microphone back to you. What do you want to say when it comes to stigma and just language when it comes to OCD?
So that never bothered me, the I'm so OCD, until I realized what it was doing. It's not that, they're uneducated about it. It's forcing the people with real OCD who firmly believe that they want to go stab their whoever mother, when that's really not what they want to do. And they'd never, I don't know if I've said this yet, but people with OCD are probably the least likely to ever commit any one of these acts, just because it so goes against the core of who they are. And that's why these obsessions persist. Let's
not confuse obsessions with OCD and psychosis, which is a different type of thing, where someone might have those thoughts, and then that person would need to call 988 or something, or 911, or something and like that. But they're different thought patterns.
They're different, and they're diagnosed too. I hope that nobody's out there saying I want to go stab someone, and then do it, be it's OCD. No, that's not OCD. People,
no. Yeah. There's a difference, and I think if you've made it this far in the episode, You
should know
be
that.
able to have the differentiation between the two.
Yes. But it didn't bother me until it made me realize that it's pushing all of these, like, real experiences. It's making them even less known. It's kind of taking away their validity. It's not really. They're always going to be valid and real. But when it reinforces what OCD isn't, when people learn what it is, they're very not always open to what it really is. When this is not just, I'm not pulling this off like some deep sect of the internet. Like, this is what, if you Google OCD, like real OCD, you're going to be flooded with information that you've heard a lot of on this podcast. And I am not, like I said, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a professional. Don't use me as a professional resource. I am just, someone with OCD sharing my experience and what I've learned in the past 10 years. Because I believe I had it long before I was 14.
And someone who has personal experience, who is encouraging people to just be mindful of their language.
Of course. Yes.
And
but thank you.
Not perpetuating further harm or stigma. So,
okay.
And I think you did that very eloquently.
Thank you. I appreciate that. All right. The first question.
How many are there?
I don't know, to be honest, because I forgot to mention one of the things that you would need to know in order to get the question right. Okay. And I am not going to say it now because then you'll. Right. So the first one, name 2 subtypes that are often used to help group OCD obsessions, which are sometimes casually referred to as themes.
POCD and SOOCD.
Yes.
Yay!
He has a 1 out of 1 so far. We love that. I'll give you... I won't go there yet. Can you describe... You don't have to do this perfectly, obviously. The cycle of OCD.
Yeah, so it starts with the obsession. There's a thought. And then that thought gets to the point where it's anxiety-inducing or panic-inducing, which then turns into the compulsion side, where that's kind of like the disorders trying to like relieve, quote unquote, the panic, the anxiety. And then you're seeking kind of, with the compulsion, you're trying to relieve it, trying to seek the reassurance. And if I'm using any words wrong too, like definitely.
No, you're.
If you're seeking the reassurance, and if you're doing ERP, you kind of leave yourself. You don't give in to the compulsion. Rather, you do the opposite of what the compulsion. For instance, the example you gave was for perfectionism, OCD. You might like misspell something, and then you just leave yourself there, and you kind of, lack of a better phrase, bathe in that discomfort.
Yes, I know. So,
oh, sorry. And then then the cycle, you might get the relief. You might do the compulsion. For instance, if let's say. It is a perfection thing, and you're doing a paper, you spell checked your entire paper, you get that relief, you feel certain, okay, that was my OCD, but then it leaves yourself vulnerable again, and that's why it's a cycle, because then your head, your mind, it's like, okay, they're feeling okay, but there could be fear of this next thing coming through, and so then the cycle starts itself over.
Yes, and it strengthens it too. Strengthens the cycle. I'll save this for the end because it really doesn't apply to what I was just about to say.
Okay.
I was gonna say what is wrong with, and you kind of answered this a little bit, but if I were to say, I'm having, let me think of one. I don't think I like Lady Gaga anymore, and I'm terrified because, like, I know that sounds so stupid, but, like, I get so much joy out of her, and this literally happened in a second, and I don't know what to do, and, like, it feels so real. Like, it mimics reality. OCD mimics reality. Like, this is a kind of a bad example, but because that's not how I would have worded it, but why is it bad to be like, that's crazy? Like, you love her. Like, you'll get, like, you're fine. Just...
Why is it bad
I'll love you if you say it.
Why is it bad to provide the reassurance?
Yes.
You don't want there to be to build, a reliance on this crutch.
Well, it's a compulsion for me to be like, hey...
Yeah. To rely on that compulsion to find the relief.
Yeah, like when you feel like you're helping your loved one by, opening the door for them if they say, I cannot touch the doorknob because there is a germ on there. It provides them temporary relief, but it strengthens that cycle. Yes. Yeah.
Did I get it? I don't know.
Yeah, I will give that. Okay. No, I will give that to you because you have in multiple times, and we just had this discussion last episode where you were like, I feel like the right thing to do is to, make you feel better. Which, I mean, that's that's anybody's reaction. It's hard for me too. We used to sit in the residential program and be like, I'm not going to reassure you. I'm not going to like we would ask each other questions. We're very sneaky about it. Like I've done it to you before where I've been like, just word vomit all of my experience and be like, but you don't think I'm a bad person, right? Like I've done it to you before this was like 2 years ago now when we went to, I don't know why this one sticks in my memory, but I do it to my mom all the time, and she's very good now at realizing what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. But yeah.
Part of what you're doing and what you did with this episode and what I did with my Academy episode for Moya Moya is you're raising awareness. Because I think colloquially a lot of people have some degree of knowledge, no matter how small, of what OCD is. But I think what you provided today with this episode is a good foundation of what the disease or the disorder, I don't want to say disease, but like what OCD is.
Disorder.
And what someone who experiences it, what that journey is like. And I think that's going to be something that a lot of people should hear and maybe wouldn't get to hear if you didn't do this episode or write this episode. So thank you. Again, I said this 2 episodes ago, but thank you for leaning into that discomfort when you wrote that letter and for writing this episode. And I think this was a great episode. So thank you.
Thank you.
And especially since
to anybody out... To anyone out there who's struggling to, I just want to say it does get better. You can, start to take the steps towards recovery. Like I said, intrusive thoughts will never completely go away for anyone, but you can live a happy life. And even in the moments of like struggle, like there are high when you feel good, you feel on top of the world, and when you don't, it feels like the end of the world. I understand that, but we try not to label those experiences as good or bad, because that just reinforces, oh, this is a bad thought, this is a good thought. It's just thoughts are thoughts,
right? And
they're going to happen, and you're going to be okay with them, and you might even say, oh, I like it, when you don't.
Sure.
And
all of the resources that you provided will be in the description, too.
Yes.
So, if you want to use resources.
Yes, and I'm just, for anybody that listened to the very end, I am very grateful to you, because I feel like I was sharing a big chunk of my story. So if you listen to it, I'm very appreciative of you, truly.
Absolutely. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you. And with that, his name is Justin Dew. I always read that way. I don't know why.
And
it's because it's written first in the thing.
We've done this for more than a year. And his name is Nick Gervasi.
You can reach us at our email at pointofdew. Nope, that's not it.
You did that last time too.
Yes, I did. But we're going to leave it in there because, imperfection. Email pointofdewpodcast@gmail.com or by sending us a voice message on our website, anchor.fm/pointofdew. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Point of Dew Podcast. Yes, that is with the @ sign this time. And Twitter at Point of Dew. If you enjoy our show, give us a rating or review in the Apple Podcast Store or share us with a friend or family member. We'd really appreciate it and are truly grateful for your support. As always, we hope you have a great week. Thank you for listening, and until next time,
I am happy, I am fine now. Am I dying? No, I am not. I felt like something was not going right, but it fucks me up till it gets crazy. It fucks me up till it gets to me. Yes, we are who we are. Everything's going right, cheers me up because time